It has been a long time since there's been this much action. One sad note in all this, of course, is the absence of one name. Our job is to choose whom we think can be the most effective. It's an interesting and exciting race, and all we have to do is vote. So let's do it, and let's make it a big one. We pray that is so. This is Bob Harrington.
Washington moves fast, policy shift overnight, and yet here in our corner of Vermont, the real impact often comes at the speed of town meetings and Main Street conversations. Politics aren't just about headlines and sound bites. It's about people, communities, and the choices that shape our lives. They say all politics is local, but in a nation this divided, what does that actually mean? We're not here for spin, we're here for clarity, for straight answers, for the kind of talk you'd expect over a cup of coffee at the local diner, not in the halls of Congress. This is Matt Harrington, and this is the Chamber Telecast. Welcome to the Chamber Telecast, a civic conversation brought to you by the Southwestern Vermont Chamber and our pals and buddies over there at Catamount Access Television. And Mike Cutler is the producer of this show. We want to thank him. I am Matt Harrington. I am your host today. In every Vermont community, decisions in Washington echo down to town halls and Main Street, right here in Bennington, Vermont, or Manchester, on all throughout the county. From federal funding and regulatory frameworks to immigration and civil liberties, what happens in DC shapes what happens in our doorsteps. In Vermont, local government doesn't happen behind a marble wall or any closed doors. It happens around the table of your town hall. At the heart of that structure is the Select Board, a uniquely Vermont institution where 5 to 7 elected citizens are charged with everyday work of governing. From setting budgets to shaping growth, managing public services to responding to crises, Select Board members are not just policymakers. They are our neighbors, leaders, and stewards of the community. Their work reflects the deeply local, hands-on nature of Vermont democracy, small in scale, but significant in impact. Today, we're joined by Tom Haley, newly elected chair of the Bennington Select Board. A lifelong community leader and public servant, Tom came to the leadership amid a flurry of local priorities, from inclusive government to expanded pathways for connection. I think there was even probably some pandemic aftermath there and some funding. So Tom has seen a lot of it in the short time that he's been on that board, but he's already made a mark guiding recent board decisions. So today we love to explore the intersection of federal policy and local action by interviewing Tom Haley and to dig into what it means for small town government in 2025. So Tom, welcome to the show. Really appreciate you hopping on today.
Thanks, Matt. Glad to be here.
All right. So you know how this goes. We like to start off with a pretty easy question, but we think it, lets us know a little bit about who you are. What did you have for breakfast today? And what do you think it says about you?
For breakfast today, I had a cup of black coffee and an English muffin.
Okay.
That's what I could grab on the way out the door. Because
what does it say about you?
I had places to be. I had things to do, and I didn't have time to spend what I would like to have, to having a full breakfast. But I do tend to be on the go quite a lot these days.
Do you find that it makes you feel more English to have an English muffin, or just sustenance?
English muffins are actually American.
Okay.
Introduced to England, I guess, in the 90s. Okay. So they were an American.
Full of information, Chair Haley is. So
I'm a font of useless knowledge.
There we go. Well, hey, Chair Haley, we are living through a period of political tension nationally, and I don't think that's missed on any one of us. As the Trump administration rolls back or redefines even long-held federal roles and standards, whether it's climate policy, social services, civil rights, what's your sense of how that's kind of cascading, rippling down to Bennington? What's the emotion or the mood right now of the community that you're seeing?
I think there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of fear among certain people. I think there is definitely a segment, I think a smaller segment of the community that's happy with what's going on in Washington. But overall, I'm seeing a lot more people that are becoming galvanized and actually starting to find their voices, which is nice to see, because the more people that are involved, in government, be it as a citizen exercising your right to speak or to protest or what have you, or maybe that will inspire some of them to maybe run for office down the road. So that's some of the good that I'm seeing hopefully coming out of this, is that people are going to be inspired to get more involved. But I think there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of uncertainty, and there's a lot of anger.
Yeah. Yeah. Tom, I've always appreciated, ever since you joined the select board, and then obviously, most recently becoming chair and
Sure.
serving in other officer positions as well. Every once in a while, the select board in Bennington has this, what I call, kind of candidate on the street, or select person on the street. You are a man, a person who I think, other times, or other members of the board come in with institutional knowledge. You think of Jim Sullivan. They come with organizational knowledge. You think of Ed Woods. I really appreciate that you have come in from going around the street, literally Main Street, South Street, wherever, and you've talked to people. You talk to citizens, and I found that always you have a great bipartisan way of talking to both left, right, up, down, whatever it happens to be. So the select board has managed over 1 million in Northern Border grants and local ARPA funds. We've had everything from the pandemic funding all the way to Build Back Better funding, and really a big move by the federal government. How have you seen over those years, both being on the board and then as an officer and now as a chair, that those federal funds have really shaped some of Bennington's infrastructure and community investment? So that's kind of part one. Part two is, now that a lot of those funds are exhausted and Trump administration's threatening even less funding, what's the future look like for Bennington? So how did we utilize those funds? How did you see Bennington kind of transform with a lot of that funding?
We were really fortunate in that we were able to leverage a lot of that money into some projects that are going to be around and supporting Bennington and its economy for a very long time. Things like the skate park, the Ben High project, just to name a few, expansions on the trail systems, things that are really adding value to the town of Bennington, things that we've heard from others outside of town that they would want to see in a town that they're looking to move to. So we did really try to work to maximize the punch that we were able to get out of the expenditures of those funds. Because some of them, interestingly enough, actually came with the strings attached that we could not use them to directly bring down taxes. So we actually had to use them for infrastructure and for things like that. But in instances like the Ben High project, once that's online and generating tax revenue, that will effectively bring taxes down. As to what the future is going to bring, we're kind of in a wait and see mode a little bit now. I'm not sure that the Trump administration even knows what they're planning on doing right now. They seem to send a different message almost every day. But they do seem to be heading in the direction where they think that the states and the individual towns should be taking up more of this slack. And I think that's a very short-sighted way of doing things. We are paying federal taxes, and we should be getting some kind of benefit in return from those taxes. And just to say that we're going to lower taxes and this is going to be a great thing for everybody in the country, I think that's a vast oversimplification. And I think it's actually, in the long run, going to be incredibly challenging, especially on the local level, to achieve the goals that we have to continue bringing our town forward without actually crushing our local taxpayers. I just think it's going to be difficult, but we are very imaginative, and we are very positive, and we are very determined that we are not going to start to backslide. We're going to continue forward progress one way or another. But we have great staff, and they'll find us what we need. I have every confidence in them.
Good. Well, let's follow that thread. We've got some great local talent, and I think we can agree with that. We got some great regional talent, but there's a lot of state and federal regulations, from zoning, Act 250, to some environmental standards, which often define how the local government can work and can't work. What challenges have you encountered, perhaps most recently, navigating those lines? And I think we could take kind of a shot at the federal level. Where have we or haven't we been able to do things in the recent past? And then let's bring it down to a state level. Where have we or haven't we been able to do things?
Right. I mean, we haven't been as restricted by the federal regulations. I mean, every grant has its particular criteria that you have to follow as you expend those monies. But you know that going in when you apply for the grant, so you can plan accordingly. I think some of our bigger challenges actually have been at the state level. I think Act 250 was um, very well intentioned, and I think some of the things that Act 250 does are good in terms of environmental, preservation and so forth. But it was really kind of handcuffing a lot of development. And I think some of the changes, I'm hopeful some of the changes that the legislature has made to Act 250 are going to bear some fruit. We're just starting to hear. I mean, we were at a meeting. We were all at a meeting yesterday where some folks from the state came down and briefed us a little bit on what the changes were upcoming. And I know town staff is already at work getting us established so that we'll fall within those criteria, so we can really cut down the amount of time it takes to actually get a project done. Because especially in this economy where prices are fluctuating so incredibly, if you have to wait 3 years to start a project, you might not be able to afford that project anymore. You just never know what's going to happen. And so I think we are seeing a lot of changes, particularly from the state, that are encouraging. And it remains to be seen. I think anytime they make any changes, there's always kinks that you find that you didn't expect, but I think they see the necessity that we have some sort of leeway to make those kinds of decisions for ourselves and still protect our environment, because um, we we can't have growth stifled for a decade while it goes through various committees.
Yeah, and you and I were at that meeting, and I think one of the big takeaways was how progressive Bennington has been and how forward leaning Bennington has been. And I think there was a lot of kudos from the state, the commissioners, about the amount of work that is already in the pipeline for Bennington. And so really, I know the commissioner was using it as a beacon for other towns to emulate. So hats off to you and your crew, and I know the town as well. Let's shift gears a little bit from that type of policy to more human policy. Last spring, the select board passed a resolution affirming due process rights, noting local fears about immigration policy. And then obviously we've had the federal tone and the enforcement of immigration across the board. Again, judge the tone here of the community. What are you feeling? How should local governments respond to a lot of the ICE stuff that's going on, deportation, the kind of the extremes? We look at LA just recently, and a lot of those extremes. And yet, I know the select board has worked really hard, kind of locally, to bind up some of those things. But talk to us a little bit about that.
Right. There's definitely. I mean, we have a large migrant population in Bennington, and we have a large population of refugees here in Bennington. So that is definitely something that's on the minds of a lot of people out there. I talked to some of these folks, and they are afraid. I had a conversation with a young man who I've known for a little while, and he was just showing me all the papers that he has to carry with him every day, just in the event he gets, randomly stopped or whatever. And he told me that he's not even sure they would do him any good, but he's following the laws and doing the things that he's supposed to do. We passed that due process resolution for a couple reasons, I think. First, to reaffirm the fact that we on the board do believe that it's absolutely necessary for all law enforcement to follow due process. A lot of people said it was a performative action or what have you, but I think there is value in having the town government reaffirm that they're going to be taking that stance. That said, I've had conversations with Chief Doucette around this, and the position of the Bennington Police Department is they're going to follow Vermont state law, which does require, warrants and so forth. And they will assist on criminal warrants if they're lawful, and not on civil warrants. I believe that's the standards set forth by the state, and that's a challenge because on the one hand, we see these things that are going on nationally and even in our state where ICE agents are coming in and just grabbing people without identifying themselves, without presenting paperwork, so on and so forth. And there's a part of me that wants to say, okay, Bennington Police Department, you shouldn't participate in any of this or what have you. But as a member of government, I also want to remember that I can't order a police officer to break the law. And that's a really hard, difficult line to cross. You couldn't order any employee to break the law. I don't think that's the right thing to do. Now, if they wanted to make that decision for themselves, I might be inclined to support them. I don't know. I'm not that hasn't come up yet, But we're doing everything we can to ensure that the residents of Bennington, all residents of Bennington, regardless of where they're from, what they believe in, how they identify, what have you, can live in our town without fear. And I think that is the primary goal of this board and of the rest of town government, is that we recognize that everyone that lives in Bennington should be able to live their best life in Bennington, contribute to the community, and not be fearful just walking down the street.
Yeah. Thanks, Tom. And I appreciate the candor and the confusion. It is a very confusing time, and you've got a couple more gray hairs than I do. You've been around for a bit, and
I'm not much older than you two either, I don't think.
Think of a time that this would have ever been a real question for the Bennington Select Board to grapple with. And so, again, I appreciate the candor and the honesty and even the humility to say, I don't know what would happen if I were trying to direct my chief of police and federal agents were coming in. And I think that that's something we all have to kind of wrestle with. But I also appreciate the Select Board stance on making sure everybody feels welcome and safe here in Bennington. Let's take a little bit of a turn here. Workforce and housing tend to continue to be top concerns if we're not talking about federal government or immigration. How have you found that local leaders can leverage the federal programs like federal housing grants or workforce development funds to address these pressing issues? I think both you and the select board and the town staff have done some really creative things around at least definitely housing, as you mentioned the Putnam block, and you mentioned the Ben High project, and even some workforce stuff. So how have you found over the years on the select board and even in your chairship as you move forward that you're going to utilize a lot of these funding and creative ways to increase workforce and increase housing options?
Well, I think one thing we've discovered, particularly with the Ben High project and starting also with Putnam Block, is the value of public-private partnerships, because we can get so much more for the taxpayers' money if we go that route, I think. And I think we're going to have to be looking at more of those types of options, provided the federal dollars come in, which is a whole nother animal. But we are seeing some of the investments we're making already bearing fruit. We're starting to see increased investment in Bennington. Most of the investment tends to be on the retail restaurant side, what I would think of being more kind of support roles for populations that I think they believe are going to be coming, because they're seeing the work that we're doing toward building the housing that we need to house the workers, And there are other projects going around town, like the Bradford Mill is underway. I know Energizer they're negotiating. There may be a buyer in place for that. I'm hoping that housing is part of his plan. So there are a lot of things coming together. So we can assist not only from a financial standpoint, but we can also aid in regulatory assistance if necessary. We've taken steps, for example, a couple of years ago, we changed some zoning around to make it easier to say convert that upper story of your garage that was an in-law apartment to an actual rental unit. Little things like that are things that we can also do in government that will enable us to build more housing, because housing is kind of the cornerstone of the whole thing, I think. We can't ask businesses to move here if we don't have the people that they need to make those businesses run.
And those people need housing.
And those people need housing. And they like amenities.
Like amenities. Yeah.
So it's all a big, it's all interconnected, which I think a lot of people forget sometimes. We get people telling me all the time, you need to make more business to town. I say, I absolutely agree. That's why we're building more housing, and we're building a skate park, and we're making Bennington a more walkable community, because we know through research that's been done all over the country that these are things that people want. And if you make those things, they're more likely to want to come to live where you are. So.
Yeah. As you kind of look at what I might call the service sector institutions of Bennington, nonprofit sectors, obviously they're getting hit a lot. Libraries, animal shelters, old folks services, whatever it happens to be, especially by the federal government. What's the conversation that's happening at the select board level, town government, about ways to come alongside and support them? We know that most times in the elections, there's some funds on the docket for a lot of these agencies, Bennington Rescue Squad, places like that. But, with such a crackdown on funding, I have to imagine these institutions are going to absolutely come to you and others about, we just can't exist anymore without the federal funding. So any conversation that's happening or preparedness around what's going to happen if and when that happens?
Nothing super specific as of yet. We have heard, whispers and so forth. As you said, people are on the ballot every spring to receive funding from the town, but that's the process where they petition. If they get their signatures, they get to be on the ballot, and that's for the voters to decide. Except the library, the rescue squad, fire department, so forth, those things we actually do fund directly without necessarily a vote. But it's going to be a challenge because the monies that we have to expend are finite. So we're going to have to get creative and look possibly at other ways other than money that we might be able to help. And as to what those might be, we're not quite there yet. Because as I said, we really don't know what's going to happen coming out of Washington. It's just, there seems to be a different message almost daily. And this big, beautiful bill is bouncing back and forth between the House and the Senate, and we'll see whatever comes of that. It's not pretty.
Yeah.
It's not going to be pretty, and it's going to be a challenge. The service agencies are going to be hit hard, and we're going to do whatever we can to help. But our resources are limited, and our abilities are limited too.
Yeah. If you had to think of one or two lessons learned or something that before you joined the select board and then after you joined the select board and went through the many years that you've done so far, what's one or two lessons you've learned or kind of axioms that you're like, man, I wish I had known this before? Or if you wanted to communicate with other citizens that said, hey, you got to really understand ... What's one or two that you'd love to kind of impart on our audience today?
Wow, that's a good question. It's my family has always been, ever since I was a little kid, has been involved in public service. My grandfather was select board, school board, served in the state senate. My dad was in the legislature, and has always been involved. And so I was kind of brought up that way in a different, and I was in the meetings as I was dragged there basically because they didn't have a babysitter. So I sat through a lot of meetings, and it's pretty amazing looking back how much I actually picked up. Going on backwards. One thing that has been a little bit of a shock to me is the lines that people are drawing, and I think this speaks more to what's coming down from national politics. We're much more polarized than we used to be. And I think that is incredibly unfortunate because I think it actually makes it more difficult to get the things done that we need to get done. I do see some hope in that area because we are still Vermonters, and we do still have that inner drive to help each other and to help your neighbor whether you like them or not. But that is one thing that has surprised me lately is how polarized a lot of this stuff has gotten. And the advent of the internet has also changed the whole game. It's everybody's got information at their fingertips, and a lot of that information, unfortunately, is not correct. But it's presented as correct, and it looks correct, and and if it fits a worldview you've already got established, then it seems even more correct. So those things are challenges. So I would ask the people out there to maybe take a step back a little bit once in a while and try to look at the bigger picture, because we can work together. I mean, my grandfather was the Republican Party chair here in Bennington for a while, and I was the Democratic Party chair here in Bennington for a while. And one thing I learned from him at the dinner table is we can disagree about stuff, but we don't have to yell and scream at each other. We don't have to be angry at each other. We can go out and get a drink after, and still have common interests. But we've got to step back, take a breath, and really think about the big picture and what is going to be the best for everybody in town.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will say under your tenure, there's been a lot of that around social media, obviously Cat TV being part of that discussion around filming live, filming on Facebook. You guys have really, I don't know if weathered the storm is the right word, because I think you're still in the eye of it. But your select board generation has definitely had to ride the waves of this great, true, big, open democracy, as well as, you can't say anything and all things, and you definitely can't spread misinformation. So our hats are off to you. I would say patience. People need to be patient with you guys. You're trying to learn it as fast as everybody else is. You guys are community members. You're elected. You're not paid a whole lot. So patience for all of you as you guys navigate that as well. As you think of your time moving forward on select board chair, how do you think of your role in stewarding not just the decision-making part of it, but the emotional well-being and unity of the community? How do you see that as your role now?
Actually, that's another. I didn't realize actually going into this position how important that part of the job is. I think what people are going to perceive and even behave like is going to be mirrored by how we behave on the board. And we've had our challenges. These are difficult times. We're making some difficult decisions. Emotions sometimes get high. We have, I think, taken some steps that are going to help in that area. Again, it's just slow down. Everybody's going to get a chance to talk. Everybody's going to get a chance to express their opinion. It doesn't have to be so tense all the time. And I'm trying really hard to bring that tone down at the meetings and when I'm out in the public talking to people. I think the first thing, if you make a decision based purely on emotions, especially if that emotion is anger or frustration, odds are you're going to make a poor decision. And you need to take the time and consider all sides, whether you like those sides or not, before you can really make the best choice for the people.
Agreed. Big question for you. I got a bigger question for you, but the first big question is, what would you like to see Washington do better? So in your time that you've already had, obviously we've got the context of the current administration, but if Washington were just this big broad brushstroke, we've got a federal help and assistance to local government. We've got state. I'll even open it up to state government. If you had to kind of think about yourself as you deepen the role as chair, what would you like to see Washington do better, or even Bennington kind of do differently as kind of the future you meet it head on?
Well, from federal and to a lesser extent, even state government, I would like a little more consistency. They don't. It doesn't have to be an open checkbook. I'm not saying that at all. But I think the federal government and the state government need to have a role in helping towns actually get done what they need to get done. We have a responsibility to our citizens to make sure we have good roads, we have sidewalks that everybody can navigate, that we have places they can go for leisure and so on and so forth, clean air. We have responsibilities for all these things. And I think that is a role that government has to play, because I think history has shown us that the private sector is not going to self-regulate and do that by themselves. So I think that's a very important role in government. And I think it's easier for us on a local level, especially because a lot of these things do seem to take so much more time the farther down the ladder you go. It's that consistency that we need so we can plan, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years ahead. Because without that kind of planning is when you get into trouble. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, no, that's great. I got another bigger one, and we'll wrap up with this one, Tom. And you and I talked about this a little bit before, and I do like to start to ask this question at the end of some of our telecasts here. All right, you're in a hot air balloon. You hop in the hot air balloon, you rise up above, you go forward, you float ahead 5 or 10 years, 2035, and you look down on Bennington. Your chairmanship is up. What would you hope to see when you look down? What would give you a good sense of pride? How would the town be thriving?
The famous time machine hot air balloon.
Yes.
I was actually looking at some aerial photos, some drone footage of Bennington just the other day. And this question brings that footage to mind. And what was really remarkable to me is when you're down here on street level, you can't really see how green our town still is. How many trees there still are. We don't have that urban kind of blight that you see in a lot of the big cities. It's still truly got a lot of that New England character, and I would still hope to see a lot of that. I would like to see more people walking and riding bikes and using alternative transportation. I'd like to see fewer cars. I would like to see balanced growth where there are still green spaces along with more. If we have to build new structures, I hope they fit into not only our New England personality, but also into the environment into which they're growing. So I would like to see a bigger, stronger, still green Bennington with a diverse population and people outside enjoying this incredible area that we're blessed to live in.
Great. I'll add to that fewer power lines. Fewer power lines, more power lines under whatever we invent in the next 10 years. But the beautiful streetscape and that beautiful green that makes up the Green Mountains. So,
yeah, I used to live up near Woodstock, and I ran a store in Woodstock, and you're looking around, you're like, something's missing, and you couldn't quite put your finger on it, but they have no power lines up there.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
It makes a difference. It really does.
I think Saratoga is the same way. And if you drive down Saratoga, the streets are obviously wider, but I think there's fewer power lines. Okay. So that's part of our mission is power lines and diversity and keeping it green.
Keeping it green.
Great. Well, Tom, Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for your thought leadership, your transparency, your willingness to hop on the show, and just your kindness as well. Always a pleasure to talk to you.
Anytime.
We've heard before that all politics is local. But what we're seeing now is that local politics depend on national policy more than ever. Federal dollars and mandates don't land softly. They hit the ground running, shaping how towns like Bennington invest in roads, homes, and emergency services, and even creating a more welcoming place. Here in Bennington, your board is leaning into that reality, inviting public voice, leaning into federal partnerships, and making governance personal again. That's an act of both courage and humility, the courage to engage broad community aspirations and the humility to recognize that even the deepest federal wells need local stewardship. To our viewers, let us remember that democracy isn't measured by votes alone, it's measured by participation, by listening, by asking hard questions, by standing up when rights are threatened, and by saying yes warmly when people seek to belong. Thank you to our producers over at Catamount Access Television and to our audience always showing up. Keep showing up, keep shaping the conversation, and know that it's in these types of moments more than ever that local leadership matters. This is the Chamber Telecast, and I'm Matt Harrington.